In our last episode, we looked at the beginnings of Fleetwood Mac, and in the first 3 years, they released 3 albums and 2 killer singles. But then their leader, Peter Green, decides to leave the band. Now, as you will see, this becomes a reoccurring theme inside the group Fleetwood Mac. People come, people go, people come, people go, but somehow the band manages to endure. So now we're going to look at the next part of the history of Fleetwood Mac. What are they going to do without Peter Green? Well, let's find out. Let's drop the needle. Fleetwood Mac decides, okay, let's continue on as a quartet. So you got Mick Fleetwood, John McVie, Jeremy Spencer, Danny Kirwan, and for their next album, once again, they bring in the talents of Christine Perfect, who is uncredited for the album, but she does draw the cover artwork. And by this time, she has gotten married to the bass player, John McVie. So Christine Perfect is now Christine McVie. The album reflects the absence of Peter Green, as it's a much different sound. Jeremy Spencer, who contributed very little to Then Play On, is all over this record. I like the lead off, This Is Rock, Station Man, of course Hi Ho Silver, One Together, and Tell Me All the Things You Do. After the release of the album, the band toured the UK, where they were not received really well because the audience did not like the sound move that they were making and really missed the presence of Peter Green. But in the US, things were very different. The album became Fleetwood Mac's best-selling album in the US to date. And 5 days before the US tour, Christine McVie officially joins the band. They set off on tour, but then a very strange thing happens in February of 1971. While they are on tour, Jeremy Spencer says he's going out to buy a magazine, so he leaves his hotel. And they never see him again for a number of days. And they get really worried about what's happened to him. Well, it turns out that he has joined a religious cult called Children of God and has decided he's quitting the band. But the band has a problem. They have a contract to finish the tour. So Mick Fleetwood calls up Peter Green and asks him to come back and help them out. And Peter says, I'll do it, but I do not want to rejoin the band. So now, once again, Mick Fleetwood and John McVie have to find a guitarist to move forward. Now, this becomes a pattern in that Fleetwood hires guitarists with not really ever having them audition for the part. He listens to them play live, or he listens to something they've recorded, and he goes, oh yeah, that'd be a great fit. And so the guitarist he finds, without ever auditioning, is a guy named Bob Welch. The first album to feature Bob Welch and Christine McVie as a full-time member comes out, and it's called Future Games. Without Spencer, the sound of the band moved more to melodic pop and vocal harmonies. The band recorded 7 songs for the album, but the label demanded at least 8. So at the last minute, an instrumental jam called What a Shame was hastily recorded. I like Christine's Morning Rain, Bob Welch's Future Games, Danny Kirwan's Sands of Time, and the closer, a Christine song, Show Me a Smile. So on a roll, just 6 months later in 1971, they released their next album, which is called Bare Trees. And look at the cover. It is a photograph that was shot by John McVie. I like Child of Mine, The Ghost, Bare Trees, and Spare Me a Little of Your Love. Although the band was doing pretty well in the studio and getting along very well together, on tour, it was a totally different animal. Part of the problem was Danny Kirwan was drinking heavily. And so one night before a concert, he had a little too much to drink and he smashed his guitar before going on stage and refused to go on stage. So the band went on and played without him. And when they exited the stage, they fired Danny Kirwan. Well, here we go again. Mick Fleetwood has got to find a replacement. But in this case, Mick and John McVie decide, well, let's get two new guys. So they get Bob Weston on guitar and a vocalist called Dave Walker. And they figure this will definitely change the sound of the band. Now, Dave Walker is hired to be a lead singer, but they go into the studio and they record this album called Penguin. And on this album, although Dave Walker is the lead vocalist, he only appears on two tracks, The Derelict and the cover song, I'm a Roadrunner, which was a song that every garage band, including the one I was in, had to also play at any one of the dances or concerts that we did. On the album I like Remember Me, Bright Fire, Did You Ever Love Me, and Night Watch. The album made it to the top 50 in the US, making it the highest charting Fleetwood Mac album in the US at that time. But after the album was released, it was decided that Dave Walker's style did not fit where the band wanted to go. So he was fired. So now they're down to a quintet, and they decide that's what they're going to use to record on their next album, which comes out called Mystery to Me. The album never charted very high on the charts, but it did stay there for 26 weeks. I like Emerald Eyes, Believe Me, Just Crazy Love, and the song that got all kinds of airplay, which was Hypnotized. There's an interesting song in this album called Keep On Going, which was written by Bob Welch, but he lets Christine McVie sing it, which is pretty rare inside Fleetwood Mac, where whoever has written the song does not sing it. But this is a band that is always courting drama. And while they're on tour, a couple of monumental things happen. First, the McVie's marriage is falling apart. And then, while they're on tour, Mick Fleetwood discovers that Bob Weston is sleeping with his wife, Jenny Boyd. And so, as a result, Weston gets fired, and Fleetwood Mac cancels the rest of the tour and announces that they are stopping and dissolving as a band. So this sets up a rather tumultuous time in the history of Fleetwood Mac because their manager is mad that they are stopping, and he decides that he owns the name Fleetwood Mac. So he goes and hires a bunch of musicians and calls them the new Fleetwood Mac and puts them out on tour. Well, this tour is a disaster. Audiences hate this band. They are booed. Their bottles are thrown at them. Promoters start pulling out of contracts, and as a result, the tour gets canceled. Now, as usual, I've created a Spotify playlist where you can listen to some of the songs that I've talked about in this episode. And here's the link, and I'll also put it in the comments below. So during the 3 years between 70 and 73, Fleetwood Mac in various iterations released 5 albums. Jeremy Spencer leaves to join a cult, and Christine McVie and Bob Welch join. And then Bob Weston and Dave Walker join. But then both of those are fired. The management starts up a new Fleetwood Mac, which is a disaster. Now, if you know anything about the history of Fleetwood Mac, you know these dramas are not going to stop. They're just getting started, and there's a whole lot more to come, which we'll start talking about in the next episode. Thanks for watching, and until then, keep a-rockin'. If you liked this episode, hit the like button, and you can also leave me a comment down below, and I'll respond to you. If you subscribe, we'll let you know when future episodes come out.